I'm sure you've heard from Commissioner Bettman already what transpired as he saw it from the meetings today. Let me try and give you just a little bit of background and let you know how we see it. First of all, I just want to go back a little bit because I understand that we have a lot of people here that haven't been covering this particular matter on an ongoing basis. There was a season-ending lockout that was imposed some 8 years ago. That lockout resulted at the end of it in the players agreeing to a 24% reduction in their salaries after having lost an entire year. And in addition to that, they secured some very small concessions from the owners in that regard, essentially that they would get improved player contracting rights, salary arbitration, free agency, and the like. The magnitude of the concessions the players made, we estimate, are about $3.3 billion over the life of the last agreement. In other words, the players were paid about $3.3 billion less over the term of the last agreement than they would have had the prior rules remained in place. At the same time, the NHL experienced record revenues every year, with the biggest 2 years in percentage increase, and I believe in dollar terms, being last year and the year before. I forget which was which, but one was at 9-something% and one was at 10-something%. So one would think, looking in from the outside, that all was well. So what proposal against that backdrop and against that history did the owners make? Their initial proposal was, let's have another 24% less. And then a little while later, it was 17.5% less. And the most current offer, if one can call it that, most current proposal, which came in the last few days, was to reduce player salaries only 12.3% against that background. And questions I get asked from the players are, is that fair? How could that be fair? How could that be balanced? What do we get out of this deal? We estimate that over the 6 years of the proposed agreement that the owners have put in front of us, this would result in players' salaries being lowered, depending on what growth rate you assume. At the owner's proposed growth rate of 5%, it's about $1.65 billion. We think the game's likely to grow at the rate it has the last several years, which is a little over 7%, and that would bring it to nearly, not quite, but nearly $1.8 billion. It's not hard to figure out why the owners would think that would be a good deal. It's pretty hard to figure out why, given the concessions last time and the promises that everything was fixed, and the record revenues, that we should face it again. When you look at this, the owner's proposal, of course, contemplates much more than that level of reduction. The rules related to free agency would be modified in the direction of the owners and against the players. The rules related to restricted free agency, the same. Salary arbitration, the same. Length of contract, the same. How the individual contracts are counted on the cap, the same. So in other words, the things players got from the last round of concessions, the owners now want, in significant part, to take away. And I would just ask you to contemplate, you've all been covering this dispute for a long time, and those of you that haven't can look, on the web and see what they've said. What is the articulated reason that they want this, other than that the basketball owners got a deal they like better than the current hockey deal, and that the football owners got a deal they like better than the current hockey deal. We pointed out that we'd be willing to take the baseball deal with no cap, but we were told that doesn't count because baseball's not a cap sport. We're supposed to pretend it doesn't exist. So against this backdrop, what did the players do? The players offered to make real concessions in terms of reducing their share out of HRR, and to do so in a fashion which they thought would be fair under the circumstances and would give them some small degree of protection. One of the things that the players have said is that, measured against the backdrop of the concessions made the last time and the record revenues, they don't see any reason in absolute dollar terms to go backwards, to take less. In the owner's last proposal, there was a make-whole provision, self-styled, meaning that that's the label they put on it, at the end. And what it said was, first part of the paragraph, which was good to read, was that in the event that the players lost salary this year under their new proposal below what they were paid last year, that difference would in some fashion be deferred and paid to them at a later time. And then we read the last half of it. And the last half of it said, except that the way it would be paid would be that the salaries of the players in future years would be reduced even more in order to make that payment. So the players being made whole would be made whole by other players, not by the owners. I even had one player say to me, so let me get this straight. If I play the next 3 years, then I'm going to lose salary in year 3, and it's going to be used to pay me salary in year 1. And the answer is yes. So there's no protection here that would be meaningful. And when you say make whole, it's a phrase that I would not have used to describe that kind of provision. Nevertheless, the players want to make an agreement. They always have. Otherwise, they never would have proposed the concessions that they already have done so, and that they wouldn't have left them on the table. And we made 3 proposals today, or rather, we gave them 3 alternative ways to look at this. And I want to describe them briefly for you. In proposal number 1, we would start out with a fixed player share. It would just be a number we would negotiate for this year and each of the next 2 years. And then, if revenues had not reached the point where that was 50%, that share was frozen for the remaining 3 years of the agreement. If the industry grows at 5%, which is what the owners say it'll grow at, they reach 50% in the 5th year. And it goes down on a fairly regular decline from a little over 55 to 50. If the industry grows at 7.2%, which is what it has, they reach 50.6% in year 3. So the suggestion that somehow the players are not moving in the owner's direction strikes me as being fundamentally misplaced. Now, I want to be clear, there are provisions in there that if the industry in fact grows faster than the owners say it's going to grow, that the players get a slightly bigger share, but only of that excess growth. The second option we gave them was to say, let's use your 5% number, 5% growth number. And the players would take, instead of a 57% share of increased HRR, which is what the existing agreement would provide, a 24.7% share. 3/4 of it would then go to the owners. And that would be true for 5 years. At the end of the 5th year, they're at 50% at only 5% growth. They're down to a little over 51 in the 4th year, a little over 52 in the 3rd year. At 7.2%, they're down under 51 by year 3. So we said, here's 2 avenues that you can look at in which the players are prepared to get down in a reasonable amount of time, given what happened, to percentages which look like yours. Not all at once, and not with big salary concessions. Not given what happened the last time, and not given the growth that we've had. And then we had a third approach, and we haven't been able to run the numbers yet. Sometimes you come up with ideas reasonably soon before bargaining meetings. And we did float it today. And it's pretty simple. And it's pretty direct. The owners want 50-50, which reduces the player's share by 12.28%, or about 13% on salaries after you take benefits out. And the players think it's only fair that they ought to honor all the contracts they've signed up until now, including a whole bunch that were signed over the last few months. So the suggestion is we'll move to 50-50 as long as you agree to honor the contracts you signed. It's pretty straightforward. Most people would like to believe that when they sign a contract with somebody that it will be paid attention to. So the suggestion we made was, since on 50-50 immediately the player's share would fall about 13% on an individual contract, we segregate 13%, and the players get paid the 13%. The other 87%, plus all the new contracts, go into a pool with HRR, and that's 50-50, and it starts right now. It's a very simple proposition. We'll get you to 50-50, but you got to agree to honor the contracts that you just signed. We think it makes a lot of sense. We think it really is fair. It couldn't be more balanced in that regard. What it doesn't do is give the owners an agreement right now to have the players give them back billions of dollars. But, just so you know, on the first option we gave them, we think the owner's savings from the current agreement over 5 years at the lower growth rate is about $854 million, and about $1.059 billion at the higher growth rate, if that's what the industry has. Excuse me, that was the second option I gave you. First option, the numbers are a little different. It's $796 million at 5% growth, and $1.117 billion at higher growth rates. Now, they may think that's nothing. Most people would think $1 billion is a lot of money. I do. Players do. My guess is most of you watching me now and that are going to read the newspaper columns and watch this on TV would think it's a lot of money. Apparently they don't. And the reason I say apparently they don't is that after the proposal was made, they did what they've done before. They take a very few minutes. They don't think about it very much. They don't analyze it. They don't talk to the other owners. They don't do anything. They take less than 10 minutes. Maybe it was 15, and we have a meeting. And we are told 2 things. All 3 proposals are rejected in their entirety. And secondly, the proposal that we recently got, I gave you the numbers on that before, is their best offer. And they might be willing to tweak it around the edges. I said a tweak is sort of a small and insubstantial thing, and they agreed. But that's it.